Disclaimer: the story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life emotions and experiences. While the title suggests it is a true story, the events, characters, and situations are created for dramatic and emotional storytelling purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, events, or locations is purely coincidental. The aim of this story is to provide readers with an engaging, emotional, and thought-provoking narrative. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening drive. The sky had already turned into a blanket of darkness, only occasionally pierced by the dim glow of the moon. Sarah and Daniel were traveling back from a family gathering in the countryside, their car filled with silence except for the faint hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. The road stretched endlessly, winding through forests and open fields. Sarah leaned against the window, lost in her thoughts, while Daniel focused on the road ahead. Their relationship had been strained for months, unspoken words hanging in the air, small arguments building into heavy silences. Tonight, neither of them had the energy to talk. Suddenly, the car jolted. A strange sound echoed from under the hood, followed by a burning smell. Daniel frowned and tried to accelerate, but the vehicle stuttered and slowed. Sarah sat upright, panic flashing in her eyes. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice tight. "I don't know," Daniel muttered, steering the car to the side of the deserted road. The engine coughed one last time before dying completely. The silence that followed was deafening. They were stranded. Daniel stepped out into the cold night air, the gravel crunching under his shoes. He popped open the hood and peered inside, though he wasn't much of a mechanic. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, watching him with worry. "There's no signal," she whispered after checking her phone. "We can't even call for help." Daniel slammed the hood shut in frustration. "Great. Just perfect." The night grew colder, the forest around them eerily quiet. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound seemed amplified. Sarah shivered. "We can't just sit here all night. What if someone dangerous comes along?" He glanced at her, his jaw tight. "We'll figure something out." After a long pause, Sarah pointed down the road. "I think I saw a sign a few miles back, a hotel or something. Maybe we should walk." Daniel hesitated. The idea of wandering down a dark, empty road didn't sit well with him, but they had no other choice. He nodded reluctantly. "All right. Let's grab what we need and go." They took their bags and started walking, their footsteps echoing on the lonely pavement. The night felt endless, each shadow stretching into something sinister. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken tension. Finally, after what felt like hours, they spotted it, a faint glow of light in the distance. As they got closer, a small, old hotel came into view. Its sign flickered weakly, as if it too was barely holding on. Sarah sighed in relief. "Thank God, at least we have somewhere to stay." But as they approached the entrance, Daniel couldn't shake the uneasiness creeping over him. Something about the place felt off. They had no idea that walking into that hotel would change everything about their lives forever. The night air was heavy as Sarah and Daniel stood in front of the flickering sign. The hotel looked as though it belonged to another era, its paint faded, windows clouded, and the front porch creaking with every sway of the wind. The glow of the neon light spelled out vacancy, though half the letters were broken, giving it a haunting appearance. Daniel hesitated, his hand lingering on the handle of the front door. "Are we sure about this?" he asked softly, his voice betraying a trace of unease. Sarah hugged her jacket closer around her body. "We don't really have a choice, do we? Unless you'd prefer sleeping in the car on the side of the road." He sighed. She was right. They needed warmth, a phone line, and maybe, if they were lucky, someone who could help fix their car in the morning. Pushing the door open, Daniel stepped inside, with Sarah close behind him. The lobby smelled faintly of dust and old wood. A chandelier hung above them, its crystals dulled and missing in places, swaying slightly as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Behind the reception desk sat an older man, his expression unreadable. His skin was pale under the dim lighting, and his eyes, dark, deep-set, studied them for a moment before he spoke. "Good evening," the man said in a slow, deliberate tone. "Looking for a room?" "Yes," Sarah answered quickly, her relief evident. Our car broke down on the road. We just need a place to stay for the night. The man nodded without surprise, as though stranded travelers were nothing new to him. He slid an old-fashioned ledger across the desk. Sign here. Room 6 is available. Daniel scrawled their names quickly, his unease growing at the man's lack of warmth. But Sarah smiled politely, thanking him as the man handed over a brass key attached to a wooden fob. The hallway to their room was dimly lit, the floorboards groaning beneath their footsteps. Paint peeled from the walls, and the carpet was worn thin, as if countless feet had passed before theirs. Sarah glanced at Daniel, whispering, "This place feels strange." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Just one night. We'll be out of here first thing in the morning." When they finally reached room 6, Daniel unlocked the door and stepped inside first. The room was small but serviceable, a double bed with faded sheets, a wooden dresser, and a single lamp that flickered when Sarah switched it on. The air was colder than expected, and the faint smell of mildew lingered. Sarah dropped onto the bed with a sigh. "Well, it's not the Ritz, but it'll do." Daniel managed a weak smile, setting their bags by the dresser. He checked his phone again, still no signal. Frustration clawed at him, but he pushed it down. Right now, all that mattered was getting through the night. They both sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant hum of the old building. Every creak of the floorboards outside, every sudden groan of the pipes made Sarah flinch. She tried to distract herself by joking, "Bet this place is haunted." Daniel chuckled dryly. "Let's hope it's not." But deep down, he felt it too, an unsettling heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves held secrets they weren't supposed to hear. As they prepared to sleep, Sarah whispered, "Do you ever feel like fate brings you to certain places for a reason?" Daniel turned to look at her, her eyes wide and thoughtful in the dim light. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." Daniel wanted to press her, but before he could, a loud thud echoed from the hallway. Both of them froze, staring at the door. Neither spoke, but the same thought passed between them. This night was going to be far from ordinary. The silence after the thud pressed against the room like a weight. Sarah's eyes darted to Daniel, wide with alarm. He raised a hand, motioning for her to stay quiet, and slowly moved toward the door. His footsteps were barely audible against the creaking wooden floor. He pressed his ear against the cold surface of the door. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just silence. "Probably just another guest," Daniel whispered, though he didn't quite believe his own words. Sarah hugged her knees on the bed, her eyes fixed on him. It didn't sound like footsteps. It was heavier. Like something fell. Daniel sighed and tried to steady his own nerves. "Either way, it's not our business. Let's just get some sleep." But Sarah couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her since stepping into the building. The thud was just another layer to her growing anxiety. She lay down on the bed, pulling the blanket over herself, though it did little to keep her warm. The lamp flickered again, casting shadows that stretched and curled across the room. Daniel turned it off, preferring the darkness to the unsettling glow. He climbed into bed beside Sarah, though the space between them remained a quiet reflection of the emotional distance they'd been carrying for months. Minutes stretched into an hour. Sleep was nowhere to be found. Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to every sound in the hotel, the pipes groaning, the faint scratching in the walls, and occasionally, what she swore were footsteps just outside their door. Finally, she whispered into the darkness, "Daniel, do you ever wonder what's happening to us?" He shifted slightly, not answering at first. He knew what she meant, but he didn't want to start a conversation that might turn into another argument. Yet, the quiet vulnerability in her voice pushed him to respond. "Yeah," he admitted softly. "I think about it all the time." Silence again, but heavier now. Sarah turned toward him, her eyes adjusting to the faint light slipping in through the thin curtains. "We used to laugh on road trips. Remember? Even when we got lost, it felt like an adventure. But now," she trailed off, her throat tightening. "Now it feels like we're just lost in every way." Daniel clenched his jaw. Her words cut deeper than she realized. He wanted to reach for her, to remind her of the love they once shared, but something inside him held back. The weight of all their unresolved issues, the unspoken resentment, it chained him in silence. Before either of them could continue, a knock startled them. 3 sharp raps on the door. Sarah gasped, clutching the blanket tighter. Daniel. He sat up, his pulse quickening. "Who's there?" he called out firmly. No answer. The silence that followed was worse than the knock itself. Daniel waited a moment longer before swinging his legs off the bed and approaching the door. He peered through the small peephole, but the hallway outside was empty. When he turned back to Sarah, her face was pale. "This place, something's not right." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know." They tried to settle back into bed, but sleep remained impossible. Sarah eventually dozed off, her breaths uneven with lingering fear. Daniel stayed awake, staring into the darkness, every muscle tense. The hotel wasn't just strange, it felt like it was testing them, peeling back layers of their silence and forcing them to confront something deeper. Little did they know, the night had only just begun, and the walls of Room 6 were about to witness confessions that would change everything. Daniel couldn't remember when he finally drifted off to sleep, but when he opened his eyes, the room was still wrapped in darkness. The old alarm clock on the bedside table read 2:47 a.m. The silence was unnerving, broken only by Sarah's soft breathing beside him. And then, faintly, he heard it again. A whisper. At first, he thought it was his imagination, the remnants of a dream. But no, it was real. A hushed murmur, muffled, as though someone was speaking right outside their door. Daniel sat up, his chest tightening. He strained his ears, but the words were too faint to understand. When he glanced at Sarah, she was already awake, her wide eyes staring at him in the dim light. "You heard it too," she whispered. He nodded. Without a word, he slid out of bed and crept toward the door. The whisper stopped abruptly, replaced by silence so deep it made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Slowly, he opened the door. The hallway stretched out before him, dim and empty. Not a soul in sight. The air was still, almost suffocating. He shut the door again, locking it firmly. Sarah sat upright now, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Daniel, I don't like this. Something's wrong with this place." He rubbed his forehead, trying to stay rational. Old buildings make noises. Maybe it's just the pipes or the wind. But deep down, he didn't believe that. They tried to go back to sleep, but unease gnawed at them. Every flicker of the lamp, every creak in the floorboards outside, every gust of wind rattling the old window felt like a warning. And then, as though the night wanted to test them further, the lights went out. The lamp, the hallway bulb outside their door, even the faint glow from the sign outside, all gone. They were plunged into complete darkness. Sarah gasped, fumbling for her phone. Daniel, but when she turned it on, there was still no signal. Just a cold blue glow that barely illuminated the room. Daniel reached for her hand. "It's fine. It's just a power outage. We'll be okay." But she wasn't convinced. And neither was he. In the dark, they sat side by side, the silence pressing them closer than they'd been in months. And it was there, in the suffocating blackness, that the weight of everything they hadn't said seemed to burst free. "I can't keep doing this," Sarah said suddenly, her voice breaking. Daniel froze. "Doing what?" "Pretending we're okay." Her voice trembled. "We're not. We haven't been for a long time. And being stuck here tonight, it feels like it's forcing me to face it." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth of her words sat heavy between them. "What are you saying?" he asked quietly, though he already knew. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I can't live in silence with you anymore. I'm scared, Daniel. Not of this hotel, not of the dark, but of us. Of losing us." Her confession cut deeper than any sound outside the door ever could. The whispers, the flickering lights, the thuds in the hall, they weren't the real haunting. The real ghost was their own unspoken pain, and now, in this old, eerie hotel, it had finally found its voice. The weight of Sarah's words hung in the air, pressing down on the silence of the room like an anchor. Daniel sat still, staring at her, his breath shallow. The flickering glow from her phone screen highlighted the tears streaming down her face. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Sarah, what do you mean by that? Losing us?" She looked down, twisting the blanket in her hands, as if gathering courage. Her voice trembled when she spoke again. "I've been carrying something inside me for months. I didn't want to tell you here in this place, but maybe it's better that it comes out now. Maybe this night is forcing us to face what we've been avoiding." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Sarah, just tell me." Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering with guilt and sorrow. "I haven't been honest with you. I met someone. It wasn't supposed to happen, Daniel. It started out as just conversations, just attention I wasn't getting from you anymore. But then it became more. I crossed a line." The words shattered through him like glass. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His chest burned, his ears rang, his entire body froze. "You? What?" His voice was low, dangerous, trembling. She flinched, tears spilling faster. "I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't go looking for it. I felt invisible, Daniel. At home, in our life together. You were always distant, always tired, always somewhere else. And I was lonely. I needed to feel like I mattered to someone." He stood abruptly, pacing the small room, running his hands through his hair. The walls seemed to close in around him. The eerie silence of the hotel now mingled with the storm raging inside him. "How long?" he demanded, his back to her. "A few months," she whispered. He laughed bitterly, though it sounded more like a choked sob. "A few months. And all this time, you've been lying to me. Sharing a bed with me, sitting in silence, and I thought it was because of me, because I was failing you somehow. But you," he stopped, his voice cracking. "You found someone else." Sarah stood, trembling. "I never stopped loving you, Daniel. I swear. It wasn't about replacing you, it was about the emptiness between us. I made a mistake, one I regret every single day. And if tonight has shown me anything, it's that I don't want to lose you. I want us to fix this." But I couldn't keep hiding the truth. Daniel turned to face her, his eyes wet with unshed tears, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "Do you realize what you've done to me? To us?" Her lips quivered. "Yes. And I hate myself for it." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant creak of the hotel's old pipes, echoing like a cruel reminder of their confinement. Finally, Daniel sank onto the chair by the dresser, burying his face in his hands. Sarah watched him, her heart breaking at the sight of the man she had once promised to protect from pain, and now she was the one who had caused it. The revelation hung between them, raw and merciless. And though the night outside was silent, inside room 6, their world was crumbling and rebuilding at the same time. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves had shifted closer, suffocating them with the weight of everything Sarah had just revealed. Daniel sat hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands pressed against his face. Sarah stood a few feet away, trembling, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he dropped his hands and looked at her. His eyes were red, not only from tears, but from the anger burning inside him. "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" His voice cracked with fury. "All this time, I thought I was the problem. I thought I wasn't enough, that maybe I'd stopped making you happy. And instead of talking to me, your husband, you went to someone else." Sarah's breath hitched. "I tried, Daniel. You shut me out. Every time I wanted to talk, you brushed it off. You buried yourself in work, in your phone, in anything but me. I felt like I didn't exist to you anymore." Daniel shot up from the chair, his voice rising. "So your answer was to betray me? To throw away our vows because I wasn't giving you enough attention?" Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she shook her head desperately. "It wasn't about throwing us away. It was a mistake, one I regret more than anything. I wanted to feel seen, to feel like I mattered. But it only made me realize how much I still love you, how much I need us." Daniel paced the room, his fists clenched at his sides. The creak of the floorboards seemed to echo his rage. "Love? You call that love? Love isn't sneaking behind someone's back. Love isn't lying every day for months." "I know," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "I know I failed you. But you failed me too, Daniel. We both let the silence grow between us until it swallowed everything. I should have fought harder. I should have screamed for your attention instead of running elsewhere. But I was weak, and I'm begging you not to let this be the end. Daniel stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on hers. The pain in her face mirrored his own. For a moment, he saw not just the betrayal, but the years they had shared, the laughter on road trips, the quiet mornings, the small touches that once spoke louder than words. But the wound was fresh, bleeding, raw. He turned away, gripping the dresser to steady himself. I don't know if I can forgive this, Sarah. I don't know if I'll ever look at you and not think of him. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the edge of the bed, sobbing. Then hate me if you have to. But don't let this be the way we end. I'm not asking for easy forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to fight for us again. Silence stretched between them, heavy with pain. Outside the window, the wind howled, rattling the glass, as though the world itself was echoing their turmoil. Finally, Daniel turned back to her. His voice was softer now, but no less broken. I don't know what tomorrow holds, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But right now, I don't want to lose you either. The raw honesty in his words cut through her grief. For the first time that night, a fragile thread of hope flickered between them, thin, delicate, but real. The confrontation hadn't healed them, but it had stripped them bare. There was no more hiding, no more silence. Only truth, pain, and the faint possibility of rebuilding from the ashes. And as the hotel groaned in the night, Sarah and Daniel sat in the darkness, broken but not yet defeated. The first hint of dawn seeped through the thin curtains, painting the room in pale gray light. Sarah stirred awake, her body stiff from the restless night. She glanced to the side. Daniel was still sitting in the chair by the dresser, his arms crossed over his chest, his head tilted back against the wall. His eyes were closed, but she could tell from the tension in his jaw that he hadn't truly slept. The memories of the night before rushed back to her, the whispers in the hallway, the flickering lights, and above all, the confession that had shattered what little was left of their fragile silence. Her chest ached with regret. Quietly, she stood and walked toward the window. The parking lot outside was nearly empty, except for their stranded car and a few others. The sign that had flickered so dimly the night before was now completely off. For the first time since they'd arrived, the hotel looked almost ordinary in the daylight. Almost. Daniel, she whispered softly, turning toward him. His eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert. He straightened in the chair but didn't speak. The silence between them was louder than any argument. Sarah clasped her hands together. I know sorry isn't enough. I know I broke something in you that I might never be able to fix. But I want you to know, I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make us right again. If you'll let me. Daniel rubbed his temples, exhausted. His voice was hoarse when he finally replied. You think one night can fix months of lies? You think saying you regret it erases what happened? Her eyes brimmed with tears. No. I don't expect it to erase anything. I don't want last night to be the beginning of the end for us. I want it to be the beginning of something different, something stronger, if we can survive it. For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the distant clatter of dishes in the lobby, the faint hum of life beginning in the world outside their small, suffocating room. Finally, Daniel stood, stretching stiff muscles, and walked toward the bed. He sat on the edge, his back to her. I don't know how to feel, Sarah. Part of me wants to walk away and never look back. But another part of me hates the thought of losing you. Her chest tightened. Then let's hold on to that part, Daniel. Please. We can find help, counseling, therapy, anything. Just don't let last night be our last chapter. He turned his head slightly, his profile etched against the morning light. I can't promise anything yet. But I can promise I'll try. For us. The words weren't forgiveness, but they were something, like a crack of light breaking through after the darkest night. Just then, a knock on the door startled them both. This time, it wasn't eerie or haunting. It was firm, steady. Daniel opened the door to find a middle-aged mechanic standing there, wiping his hands on a rag. Morning. Heard you had some car trouble last night. The front desk called me. Relief washed over Sarah's face. For the first time in hours, She felt the grip of fear release her chest. Daniel nodded. Yeah, we did. Thank you. The man gave them a polite nod. Shouldn't take long. I'll get you back on the road soon. As he walked away, Daniel and Sarah exchanged a look. Their car could be fixed, but the road ahead for their marriage would take much longer. Still, as the morning light poured into the room, they both knew one thing: they weren't done trying. Not yet. The mechanic worked quickly, his tools clinking against metal as Sarah and Daniel stood nearby, watching their car come back to life. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of dew and gasoline. For the first time since their breakdown, the world around them felt alive again, birds chirping, the sun rising higher, people moving about their day. Yet, for Sarah and Daniel, nothing felt the same. Sarah hugged her arms around herself, stealing glances at Daniel. He leaned against a wooden post, arms crossed, his face unreadable. She wanted to reach for his hand, to bridge the distance between them, but fear held her back. Fear that he would pull away, fear that his silence had already made its decision. Finally, the mechanic straightened and wiped his hands. She's good to go now. Just needed some work on the alternator. You should be fine the rest of the way. Daniel nodded, handing him cash. Thank you. When the mechanic left, Sarah and Daniel stood in front of their car, the weight of the night pressing down on them once more. Daniel opened the passenger door for her. The gesture was small, automatic, but it stirred something in her chest, a reminder of who he once was and maybe still could be. The drive started in silence. The hum of the engine filled the empty space between them. Sarah stared out the window, the trees blurring into streaks of green and gold as the morning sun lit up the road. She wondered if this was the beginning of the end, if Daniel's silence meant he had already decided. But then, his voice broke through. Low, steady. Last night, it wasn't just about your confession, Sarah. It was about both of us. About how far we let things fall apart without saying a word. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. He kept his gaze on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel was tight. I'm angry, he continued. More than I can even put into words. And I don't know when, if, I'll be able to forgive you. But I also know this. I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want us to keep living like strangers. If we're going to move forward, it has to be different. Honest. Even when it hurts. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they weren't just tears of guilt. They were tears of hope. I want that too, Daniel. More than anything. I'll fight for us. I'll fight for you. If you'll let me. For a moment, silence returned, but it wasn't the same suffocating silence of before. It was softer, tentative, like the fragile pause before a new beginning. Daniel glanced at her briefly, his eyes tired but not empty. Then maybe, that night in the hotel wasn't just a nightmare. Maybe it was the way-up call we needed. Sarah placed her hand gently on his, resting on the gear shift. He didn't pull away. And though the road ahead was uncertain, the touch felt like the first step toward something new. The hotel they left behind would always remain a shadow in their memory, an eerie place where whispers filled the hallways and secrets came to light. But for Sarah and Daniel, it wasn't the ghosts of the building that haunted them. It was their own silence. And in facing it, they had found a truth they couldn't ignore. They drove on, the road stretching endlessly before them. Not as the same people who had broken down the night before, but as two souls forced to confront their fractures, now trying tentatively, painfully, but sincerely to heal. That night in the hotel hadn't destroyed them. It had changed them. Forever. 11.